السلام عليكم. في العاصمة الفنزويلية كاراكاس التقينا به مراقبا للانتخابات الرئاسية. هو ممثل مشهور في هوليوود، لديه العديد من الأفلام المعروفة، لكنه أيضا معروف بكونه من أصحاب المواقف المناهضة للحروب والمدافعة عن الشعوب. لم يسهب كثيرا في التعريف به. إنه الممثل الأميركي داني غلوفر.
We're here because it's the right time to be here. We're tired and sick and tired of being sick and tired. That's why we're here.
No, I'm gonna will it not to happen.
Will it?
Yeah. You know,
Will it?
I'm not too old for this shit. I'm not too old for this. You will it not. We're not too old for this shit.
Oh, well,
We're not too old for this shit. We're not too old for this. Say it like you believe it. We're not too old for this shit.
I'm Danny Glover, activist and actor. We just did a scene from the trial of the Cuban Five, who are doing long sentences for fighting terrorism.
It's a pleasure, Mr. Dani, having you with us.
Thank you very much.
So how was the elections in Venezuela?
Well, it's quite an extraordinary process, and it's also an indication of the maturing of a democracy. The fact that there were 81% of eligible voters who actually participated in the election, and the enthusiasm, the transparency that exists in the process itself, the electoral process, the way in which people have identification cards, they also have thumbprint, they vote, and the verification process and the collection of information, I think is a very important step.
In a way or another, is the Venezuelan election comparable to the American elections?
Different. And the first major difference is that it is, while a national election that we often talk about, states can apply whatever rules that they may want in determining which part of the electorate is participates in it. They can often disenfranchise and exclude people from the process. And the fact that here, that everyone has the right to vote. It is not a privilege, it is a right.
Have you met Mr. Chavez in this trip?
I had an opportunity to see President Chavez just briefly as he welcomed and shook hands with a number of the delegation of those who acted as observers over the election.
Many say that the regime in Venezuela is on the opposite side of the U.S. administration. How come that you're here?
Well, certainly the relationship for not only Venezuela, but countries in the region, whether it's Ecuador or Bolivia, it's at times, of course, Venezuela, or Argentina or Brazil, have been relationships that have had some sort of friction. And that may be due to the changing relationship that's occurred between countries in the region and the United States itself. The United States policy, for the most part in this region, is dictated by a way of relationship that is had that began with the passage of the Monroe Doctrine in 1823. Well, certain things have changed in this region, and even though the U.S. is the most powerful country and the most economically strong country in this region, you have Brazil, which is the 5th largest economy in the world. You have Venezuela with some of the most valuable oil reserves in the world. You have Bolivia with some the most abundant natural gas reserves in the world. So you have so many countries here which are now decided that they have the opportunity to act on the will of the electorate, to act on the will of its people, to determine its own goals and determine its own paths.
There is a point of view that countries in Latin America, some countries in Latin America and other countries in the global south are threatening the authority of the United States of America. What do you think?
Well, certainly there are countries that are in the global south, countries like India, which has the second largest population in the world. China has become the most powerful economic engine in the world, and will be, if not now, soon will be the most powerful economic engine in the world. So there's a threat certainly to American economic hegemony. And so there may be those feelings that now dictate, with some respect, the way in which foreign policy is determined.
We are just like a month or 2 months away from the elections in the United States, and maybe there is a change. Maybe Romney will win, maybe Obama will continue. What do you think? Any change in the United States will change the way they deal with the war?
That's to be seen. I'm not a prognosticator, a predictor of what kind of relationship the United States will have with the world. If indeed there is a change, or if indeed there's the election or re-election of President Obama. One thing has been consistent in U.S. foreign policy is that foreign policy goes beyond respective administration, whether it's Republican or whether it's Democrat. There seems to be a foreign policy in which all of them, both of them parties, both major parties, agreed to.
Unified foreign policy.
I'm sorry?
Unified foreign policy.
Well, there's some consistency, and I think that consistency has been a part of U.S. history, and particularly after World War II. The U.S. involvement in the Middle East, the U.S. involvement in Southeast Asia, that policy has been a policy that is established post-World War II and has resembled has been the same virtually from one administration to the next administration.
Do you think there will be a change or a shift in the foreign policy in case Romney came to the White House?
Well, we've seen a changing war in any region.
Yeah.
War anywhere in the world is not bad for the inhabitants of the country and those who are the ones who are the perpetrators of the conflict. That's the case wherever we are. War impacts or destroys not only our common history as human beings, it also destroys, or has the greatest effect on particularly women and children and families and communities. So those are the vital organs which are often compromised and destroyed, and in terms of and decimated by war. That's the first thing about it. It seems as if there's been a policy of various conflicts that the United States has participated throughout, especially since World War II, whether we're talking about the Korean War, the Vietnamese War, other attempts or invasions or war or bombings of places in Southeast Asia. We also have what has happened in Afghanistan. We also depend on Iraq. And all of these moments, and we see what is happening in the Horn of Africa, places like Somalia and other places that certainly are under the guise of the war on terrorism, have been the central place of conflict, or I would say not conflict, simply conflict, but the escalation of conflict as well. We also have something that exists in the world that is perhaps proliferated since World War II, is the amount of arms that exist in the world, legal and illegal arms that exist in the world. And those arms are in the hands of certainly those groups which in some sense are defending themselves, or defending their national integrity often, or are planning certain attacks in terms of we would refer to as terrorist attacks. So there's an abundance a saturation of arms in the region. In fact, if we look at the overthrow of the Gaddafi government in Libya, we see a larger expansion of more arms introduced into other conflicts that exist in the world. Conflicts do exist. Whether those conflicts are civil wars, internal conflicts, or whether they are wars of which exist to project some sort of fundamentalism or some other kind of way in which it becomes dangerous to the world itself, are sometimes things that are inconclusive.
But President Obama 4 years ago during his campaign said that he's committed to end the war on terror, so-called war on terror.
It depends on how you define the war on terror. What do you mean by the war on terror? You know, and that's something that that's an interview that perhaps is an elaborate interview to think about what is happening and who defines who the terrorists are, and often at the exclusion of creating relationships that other people may find terrorists that exist and perpetrate state terror. So it depends upon how we look at this war on terror. Certainly, we watch quote unquote terrorist activity against countries and against groups for a long period, and during this extraordinary moment in world history from over the last 65 or more years. We watched a war in Vietnam, which could be today defined as a terrorist war, even though it was a war of national reconciliation and national liberation. So all of the ideas in which we think about this are formed by the contemporary view, which is the propaganda around what is considered the war on terror.
Isn't it strange that the United States, or in the United States, it's only between the Democrats or the Republicans that a president can be chosen?
Well, of course, most of the attention is given to the parties that have the most money and the most resources, since the electoral process is something guided by how much money you have. So if you're spending $1 billion on an election, certainly your efforts, the efforts of anyone else, any smaller party, say the Peace and Freedom Party or the Green Party or any other party that exists, pales in comparison. No one's able to raise that kind of money unless there's a great deal of great number of wealthy people who have political interests and who want to determine the outcome of the election. And the only two parties that we give any kind of semblance of validity to in terms of their agenda, their proposals, are the Democratic and the Republican Party. So that's the case. But there are other parties. The question of a third party has always been a party that a situation that exists. Since you do not have proportional elections, that means that a party receives a particular seat in the House given the percentage of votes that they receive in the voting arena. That does not happen. That happens in most of the world. That happens in a place like Germany, where you may find a party to the left may receive 11% of the votes in the general election, and as a result of that, they receive 11% of the positions within the House, the representative House, among the people. So there's no proportional relation. Is either Democratic or Republican, which seems to be, in some sense, in a diverse world and a diverse country, it seems to be archaic.
You just said that the money, the authority are between the Republicans and the Democrats. And you're a man with maybe different point of view. Have this affected your career in a way or another?
I'm not I don't have any reference to, I don't have any way in which I can reference that or understand.
I mean, for example,
I'm not, what I'm saying is that if I pay attention to what happens to me in terms of what I say or what I do as a citizen, then I'm giving a great deal of credibility to those people who may feel that what I say is not the right thing to say. So I would spend my time worrying about whether I work or not work depending upon the position I take on a particular issue. I don't do that.
So you care less?
I don't do that.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a part of the way in which I've been socialized in the world, and not a part of the way in which the history that I've experienced has politicized me. So I do not think about that, you know, and whether people think it may happen and may harm my career, then that's what it is. But career is defined by so many things. It's defined by what I look like on camera. It's defined by issues around who I am as a human being, as an African descendant. It's defined by my age and how old I am. It's defined by so many things. For me to belabor the fact of what I say having an input and importance on whether I work or not is a waste of my time.
In the past year, several regimes changed in the Middle East. This was called the Arab Spring. What do you think about this phenomenon?
Well, I saw the process as a reimagination or a reemergence of what I would call participatory democracy. And it's been in other places. It's places in the global South that this has occurred. Certainly, it has occurred in Latin America, where people have thrown off the burdens of past history in an attempt to revitalize and provide a new history for the region and for the individual nations. I mean, I saw if there was an Arab Spring in this year, last year, 25 years earlier, there was a spring that happened in Haiti when they overthrew a dictatorship in Haiti and voted in a democratically elected president in Haiti. This happened 25 years ago. So I think that the Arab Spring, and let me say, long overdue, and it's a continuing process. It is not, it's simply a process that has just terminated with what happened in Egypt, or what happened in Tunisia, or what happened in other places, as we may see around the region. But it is a continuing process of people now introducing a way, revitalizing their own sense of their role with governance. Now, you take in Iraq in 1953, Mossadegh was elected as the president running on a nationalist agenda. He was overthrown by that. You look at Iraq at its independence, it was a secular society with great participation from many people, many women, men, teachers, professionals as well. You look at Afghanistan. Afghanistan, at the point of its independence, there was the largest number of teachers were women in Afghanistan. So you see something that happened from the moment of independence, the moment where people began to see themselves in their national agenda, and what has occurred since that time, and what is emerging now.
Okay, knowing that the United States have democracy and freedom of speech, whatever, but some say that it might need a spring related to the administration in general.
The USA did have a spring, Occupy Wall Street. Certainly the articles, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, which the Declaration of Independence, which are the foundation of the founding of this country more than 230 years ago. in itself, almost 240 years, stands as a dynamic expression of what was happening in the world, given the introduction of new systems of governance, new systems of exploiting nature and economic development that was happening in the world more than 250 years ago. They do not mean that they're the most proficient ways of governance today. In fact, you can argue that the articles which govern other countries, some countries in the world, are much more advanced than those which govern the United States. And I think sometimes we make a mistake of confusing the idea of freedom of speech as opposed to freedom to buy, or freedom to consume, or freedom in that way. And that any movement that's organized, that challenges from the bottom up, that challenges the authority under this particular democracy in the United States, is often met with attempts to undermine it, to destabilize it, whether it's a movement against anti-globalization, whether it's movements that have occurred where people have expressed a greater will to participate and to control what is happening in their community. So does this democracy in itself, and what it seems like, really represent the democracy and the ideals that existed from the beginning? The ideals that existed from the beginning were the ideals of men who were slave owners, who were property owners, and there was their vision of their own way of having self-rule themselves. It did not include women, it did not include slaves, it did not include people without property. Now, what has happened, because history in itself happens and no lie lasts forever, that those changes that would happen with the abolition of slavery, the civil rights movement, the movement of women, et cetera, the movement of minorities, has changed all those dynamics. Is that enough to ensure a change of democracy that it seems to be mired in, or seems to be situated in, an expression of how much money you have, how much wealth you have, and how effectively you can exploit another group?
Have you ever tried through your career to promote your own point of views, thoughts, whatever?
I'm a citizen.
Yeah.
And throughout my adult life, I've tried to do the best I can as a citizen, before my career and hopefully after my career.
But during your career, in films that you directed or acted or whatever?
At times I've been able to support things that I think were necessary. You know, there are films that I produced, that I've been producers on, whether it's a film about the war on drugs, a documentary, whether it's a feature film by one of the great filmmakers in the world, Ilya Suleiman, a Palestinian, The Time That Remains, or whether it's a film on the African debt crisis called Bamako by a great filmmaker from Mali, Abdurrahman Sissako, or whatever I tried to do in cases. Not always have I been able to express all of my ideals within the films I do, but I do not at the same time abdicate my responsibility as a citizen to talk about the things that I think are necessary to talk about.
Thank you very much, Mr. Glover. It was a pleasure having you with us.
Thank you. All right.